Hi there, my name's Glenn Withers and I'm one of the founders of the Australian Physio and Pilates Institute. If you've been watching the other videos, you'll know a little bit more about what the technique is about, some of the principles behind what we hope you'll gain out of the training with us. What I'd like to do now is give you a real practical insight into how the APPI Pilates method works. Now when you come onto our training, you're going to begin your training with our mat work level 1. And in mat work level 1, it's really important to us that we get across the key principles of what the Pilates technique is all about. Now how do we do that? We'll talk you through a bunch of theory around those, but most importantly, we'll take you through a practical session just like I'm going to do with you now, to teach you the 5 most important principles in order to do any Pilates exercise nice and safe. Now in fact, in our clinical application of this, when we're working with our clients in clinic, this is exactly what we do on our initial assessments. So I'd like to take you through that now. The first thing that we do in Pilates is we talk about breathing. Now a lot of us, when we breathe, we allow our tummy to come out and in. And the muscles that actually support you are therefore relaxing and contracting, and that isn't the best way for us to breathe. So we're going to do a session here where we look at that to start with. So Francesca, what we're going to look is just how you breathe normally to start with. Okay, so I just want you to take some normal breaths in and out. And what we're doing is looking, where does Francesca breathe from? Does she breathe from her tummy rising and falling? Does she breathe from her rib cage coming out and in? Is she in fact an apical breather? Is there a lot of tension up around her neck, and are her shoulders moving up and down when she breathes? So rather than put my hands on straight away and make an assumption of how she breathes, we look at what the client does first. And once we get an idea of that, then our teaching becomes relevant to the client. So what we do from there is we start to become aware of it. So we put our hands on here, and I put my hands right on the sides of the rib cage. Can you feel my pressure in my hands there? Alright, what I want you to do now is just try and breathe into my hands a little bit more. Good. Now what you can see is my hands are expanding, and then we release, and it just relaxes. I put a little bit of pressure on there, breathe into my hands, breathe, and then we just relax and let the air go. Breathe deep and wide into my hands, relax and let the air go. Good, breathe deep and wide again, relax and let the air go. Good, now by encouraging this lateral expansion breathing, keep breathing for me, what we do is we leave the lower tummy free to do the muscle work that we want it to do in our centering process that we go on to in a moment. Now this is all good and well, and when I've got my hands on there I can help the client a lot. But what can the client do at home? Well, if we bring our TheraBand in, and what we can do is create that with the TheraBand. We put the TheraBand underneath here, okay, and then we can cross it over. Hold on with this hand and this hand. Okay, now Francesca can give herself a little bit of tension on that rib cage. And as she breathes in, she can feel that tension onto the band, and breathe out, it relaxes. Okay. Now we don't want you to lift up at all. Breathe out, breathe out, breathe out, breathe out. That's it, and release. Good, so I'm looking to get that ribcage expand out and release, and the band can just give my client that sense of what my hands could do if I was working with Francesca in clinic. Okay, if we let this go, and out. And now our next key element is the centering, and this is one of the really crucial parts of any Pilates program, because every exercise we do, you're going to need to be aware of this. Now what we talk about with centering is first up, whether you're in your neutral spine position. Now please remember that neutral is different for everyone. Okay, sometimes people look at this and they think that it should be the exact same position, and it's not. It's not an anatomical point. It's a relative point. So we want to make sure it's right for this person. And we find that by looking at the pelvis. And if you imagine your pelvis here, almost like a bucket of water, and your back is the back, and if you tip backwards like this, that water's gushing out the back, and that's what we don't want, because it's the wrong position. If we tilt forwards all the way, forwards, feel how uncomfortable that is? If I was to say to my client, okay, walk around like that all day, they're not going to be very happy. So we find a midway. We rock back and forwards, we rock back and forwards, and then we just settle about halfway between that point, where there's a tiny little gap under the spine here, just enough, if I was going to put a silk scarf under there, it would slide through beautifully without any problems. And it should be a nice position for my client. My client shouldn't feel uncomfortable in that position. Ultimately, this should be a pretty much the same position when they stand up and walk out the room that they're adopting anyway, because that's where we need to train them. Traditionally in Pilates, we were trained with a very flat back. We were pushing the back into the bed. And at APPI, when we were looking at that, we were like, well, that doesn't really make sense because that's not how I function. Fortunately enough, there's a bunch of research that's been done on that and proven that the different positions of your spine, this neutral spine, is the best position to get all of these core control muscles working. And then it's important that a client gets an understanding of what these core control muscles are. Now I'm going to focus here just on the inner core, but I do want to stress to you that in the APPI method, we are not just interested in one muscle. We're not interested in one isolation of a muscle. We're interested in how the entire core works. The inner core is still important. The outer core is important. And what we class as the extended core, the glutes, the hips, the shoulders, is also very important. So sometimes when you're looking at the process of teaching, you can get blinded by thinking we're just talking about one muscle. It's absolutely not what we're talking about. This is a graduated program that involves the entire core. What do we mean by that? Those muscles that attach between the rib cage and the pelvis and to the spine to create this center of movement. Okay? Now we're going to talk about the different muscles that activate to help you do that. And so we've got your diaphragm, your transversus abdominis, your multifidus, your pelvic floor, all interconnected and all important on working. But how can I get my client to feel that? It's more important that I get my client to understand a sense of awareness of what is working around this inner core. So we have a way of doing that. If you take your hand here and you put that hand onto this bony point right at the front of your hip, and then you come in an inch and down an inch. And here we can get some feedback from that transversus abdominis muscle. But again, I stress, I'm not just interested in that one muscle. I'm saying what happens with this, the pelvic floor, the diaphragm, the multifidus at the back, all these different muscles that interact. So I'm going to give my clients some visual imagery. And in the program, we talk a lot about the visual imagery. Here we're going to imagine like you've got a belt around your lower pelvis here. Okay? And again, I want to stress, I'm going to show you this with my hand. This is Francesca's belly button. It's up here. You notice that I'm not interested in that? I'm not up there. We're right down here. Lower tummy activation. I don't want that belly button to sink in. Yeah, it's different muscles. We're down here, low slung belt. Imagine there's like 10 notches on that belt. And if I was to tighten that belt up, you'd be working as hard as you could. We don't want to do that, okay? Because you've got to do this all day long. So we just want 1 or 2 notches on that belt. All right. It's really important. A lot of people, when you talk about their core or their centering, they grip and they brace. Yeah? Now, we want something that you can function with all day long, right? Not just to do an exercise on the mat. So it's got to be relevant, it's got to be controlled. So we're going to think about that belt. Take a breath in, and a breath out all the way. Good. Now stop breathing. Now slowly and gently think about drawing that belt into the 3rd notch here. Just a little connection, great. Can you feel that little tension under your hand here? So Francesca's got a little tension under that hand. I can feel the same on this side. It's not pushing into my hand. It's like a drawing in. Yeah? Almost like a corset. Imagine a corset that you put on your back. And that's exactly what a lot of people do when they're injured. Well, our muscles can do that for us. So now we hold that and Francesca breathes. And I'm seeing how many breaths can Francesca do while I keep this connection. Why is that important? Because that's how many repetitions of the exercise I'm going to give her. Okay, if you hold now, hold your breath, and now release. And I feel that that muscle goes away. Because if Francesca can only isolate this muscle and keep it controlled with breathing for 5, 6 breaths, but I give her 10 repetitions because I'm giving everybody the same number of repetitions, that doesn't make sense. I'm checking here to see how many repetitions my client can do, and then they can gradually improve that. So that's the second key element, what we call centering, and it's vital with every exercise. And then we move up to the rib cage here. What you see in Pilates is a lot of people, as the exercises become harder, as we push on to mat work 2 and mat work 3, they start flaring their ribs. They lift their ribs up like this. Okay, if you do that for us, we lift up. All right, you can see that big gap underneath here now, and you feel how uncomfortable that is. Yeah? Now relax. Now our clients are doing that because the exercise has become too hard for them, and they're compensating for this support by lifting too high. So what we do is just teach them that, make them aware of that. A lot of what we're doing here is becoming aware of where you are in space, where your movement is. So if you lift the rib cage up, lift, 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 it feels uncomfortable, right? If you're going to do exercise there, you'll be like, no, I can feel all these big muscles working way too hard. If I just ask you to just soften your ribs, just relax, that tension goes away. We can still keep our activity through these deep muscles, but we don't need to ram ourselves up into that extended position, and that's all it is, becoming aware. So what we talk about on the courses is just making our clients aware that your teacher's going to come across and just say soften your ribs, or relax your ribs, and that's all we mean, okay? That you've arched up or flared your ribs, and you need to release that off with keeping this connection here. Then the fourth key element are the shoulders. Okay, now we see people like this all the time, right? And like this. And we just have to become aware of how we correct that. So if we shrug the shoulders up, and there. Feel all that tension? Doesn't feel so nice, right? Alright, now reach down all the way to the floor. Reach. And if we go too far, we get that tension back again, right? It's like, I don't want to be there. Shrug up. And now this time, just lengthen down, lengthen, just down to here. Okay, and you see this nice shape from the neck to the shoulders, and it's not a whole lot of tension in there. It feels nice to be there. Now float the hands up, both hands, palms in. Okay, so when we look at the shoulders, we're looking at this position as well as this position. So now if you imagine that you reach your hands up to the ceiling and you round in the back. Yeah, round. And that's me being like this, right? Doesn't look so nice. So imagine like there's two plates on your shoulder blades here, and you slide those plates down. It's like you're opening the shoulders, keeping the same height. Notice how the shoulder hasn't gone up or down anymore, it's stayed there. Alright, hold. Keeping that there. Now we take both hands overhead. Now I'm giving a little test to see, can we maintain the shoulder position, the rib position, and the centering? We're starting to link all of the key elements in. And then we come back. Good. And this forms an exercise for a client. Breathe out as you go back. Breathe in as you come up. Breathe out as you go back. Breathe in as you come back. And I'm starting to get some dissociation between the upper limbs and the trunk. And then lower the hands down. Okay, that's just a very simplistic way of how you would do it. There's many more different exercises that you will learn how you can incorporate that shoulder control. And our final key element is the head and neck. Now what we often do to people is we get them to place their hand behind the head and neck as well. So if you take this hand and you place it behind your head and neck, okay? And we've got the thumb right down onto that bony point at the base of your neck and the little finger up at the bony point at the top of your neck. Yeah? Alright, now poke your chin up to the ceiling like this. Good. That looks terrible, right? You don't want to be walking around the street like this. Now what does that feel at the back of your neck? Is that shorter or longer?
Shorter.
It's shorter, right? So when in Pilates we want a long neck. So if we nod the chin, you feel how your back of your neck is lengthening now.
Yes.
Yeah? It's important that we get our clients to understand where it means. Sometimes you say to people, lengthen your neck, and they stick their chin out like this. Or actually that's shortening the neck that we're interested in. So you poke the chin up, short neck, poor posture, don't want to be there. Nod the chin, lengthen the neck, much nicer posture. Now we're also activating those deep neck flexors, and in the Mat Work 1 we go and do a whole little section on how those work. But if we take this hand down now, to there, and we look at our breathing, we look at our centering, our rib cage is relaxed, our nice shoulder position, our nice head and neck position, our 5 key elements, we've taught basic postural correction. Now if you sit up for me on the edge of the bed here, and we have a look at doing that exact same thing in sitting. Yeah? Exact same thing. So, we think about our breathing, it's nice and relaxed, we're not breathing in the shoulders. We lift a little, so we're up in that neutral position. Our rib cage isn't sticking forward, it's just nice and relaxed. Our shoulders are connected, and we have our little chin nod. Now all of a sudden I've taught seated posture very easily. Sometimes seated posture teaching becomes really difficult. It doesn't need to be. And it becomes difficult because often we overdo things, we overcomplicate them. And a lot about what you learn on the APPI modules is how to just get people aware that actually postural correction is pretty easy. And actually moving correctly is pretty easy if we just become aware of it. We become aware of what we're doing. Exactly the same. If we stand up, see those same 5 key principles. Our breathing. We come into neutral. our shoulders are open, our neck's nice and long, and then all of a sudden we have a lovely postural correction that then can flow. You see how this now goes into all our movements, whether I'm doing movements lying down, whether I'm on the mat, on the ball, sitting or standing. All of these things can work really well to help you understand how to get postural correction. Now this is what we'll do when we go through our training. We'll give you a whole lot of tips and tools of how you can use basic principles to improve your exercise quality. If you join me on the next video, we're going to have a look at exactly how we do the modifications within the APPI module. We're going to take a traditional Pilates exercise and show you exactly how the courses work. Hope to see you on the next video.